player will.
Welcome back, Visions fans. Ready Player Will here. This is the Sonille character review. It's a brand new unit released to global this week that's technically free. You can farm her and her mind spheres in the far plane. The quests are a little bit difficult and maybe requires a different video, but should you have her, should you build her, this is the review that you'll need. Now, pretty standard things here today, all the stuff I normally cover. I did drop out the sample builds, though. I've found as of late, they just don't really give a lot of information that I think really tells a good story, because there's so many different ways to build varying teams that probably deserves a deeper conversation, but I think you still have everything you need here. Now, for the character overview, brand new Dark unit added to the game with the Duelist main job, at the Dual Gunner and Axe Knight sub-jobs. She does equip swords as part of the Sword Warrior group, and it also equips cloths, hats, and accessories as a move 3, jump of 2 unit. 70 cost, so a little bit lower of a rating, and I do recommend the 50 Faith. There's really no reason to go higher than that. Now, her max range in the main job is 5 squares away. She does have 2 AoEs and 2 single target abilities there on the main job. Resistance-wise, the only real thing to look out for is any kind of pierce damage, where she is negative 15% to that pierce damage. The ailments, it's 50% to Toad and to Disable, 10% to Confusion. The Disable one is actually kind of nice because a lot of the Arithmetician sub-jobs do have Height Disable, and although we haven't seen that status effect on the Arithmeticians in quite some time, that's still a good one for an evade unit to have innately. The Toad one actually kind of nice too, because as a 70 cost unit, you would likely see her in a lot of limited Guild War formations where Halloween Lucia is still pretty popular. And so there's your anti-Toad mechanic right there if you ever encounter her. But other than that, nothing really crazy from an ailment perspective. The mastery ability, they gave her a 20% permanent slash res pen, 10% extra critical rate, which is a crucial part of her kit. She's got an extra 20% evasion versus slash type units and 15 unit res innately as well. Now, from a stat perspective, although she's technically a 4th anniversary unit, she is a 70 cost unit. She is free, so obviously temper expectations a little bit. That being said, for an evade unit, her overall HP is not in the worst spot possible. The attack is definitely a little bit of a lower tier than what we're used to seeing at the 409, but that's still certainly fine. The dexterity is exceptionally high here given her cost and release. That as a high crit rate unit, I'm really happy they were very liberal with the dexterity stat here at the 254, and the luck stat, she is the second highest in the game, so in this absolute top tier. Now, the total stat analysis, they actually give her an immense 108 luck on the board. That's the highest I can remember ever seeing, and puts her well above everyone else for the most total luck in the game, and obviously setting new highs here in the charts. I don't think any surprises here from the rest of what we were expecting. They went with HP percent on the board node here, which is a little surprising, but honestly not the worst decision. That's kind of a recent trend as of late with these characters, but overall I'm pretty happy stat-wise where she ends up given her cost and given her the type of character she is. Now, from an agility perspective, this is where I do think it's a little bit of a weakness. Innately speaking, with the vision cards, she's basically average in terms of her agility. She does have a 12% passive, which I do think is necessary to have on all the time. Not only does that help her in the turn rotation versus all of these very fast DPS will be competing against, but also from an evade perspective, the agility is part of the hit rate calculation. So even with that 12% agility, she's coming in around this 87. Not a bad spot. I'm pretty happy. Would have liked it to have been higher, absolutely, but I think that's pretty good considering all these other factors. Now, for the other stats, the innate critical hit rate is definitely on the higher side here. And this is, again, without any kind of passes equipped, without any kind of equipment. She definitely skews very high total innate crit hit-wise. I'm sorry, quick edit. I knew this looked low. She's actually very high, much higher. I thought this was the case. Very high innate critical hit. They gave her a ton of crit rate on her board nodes. It's obviously in the mastery ability. The crit avoidance rate also skews higher as well, just because of how high her luck stat is naturally. So very happy with both of these stats. The accuracy, innately speaking, isn't in a bad spot, but she does not have any passives to increase that. So overall accuracy tends to be relatively higher, but still not amazing, but as a very high luck oriented unit in all the builds you will give her, she will end up being relatively accurate because of how much luck stat she'll have, which on that note, from an evasion perspective, she is near top of the charts for the highest innate evasion potential in the game. Right behind, I think only Immortals is on, and right above Halloween Lucio by a couple percentage points. So very happy considering this is really what they wanted her to be build wise. Now, for the report card, effective HP is fair. It's actually better than most evasion units in the past, but compared to most modern units, very, very lackluster. And honestly, the survivability, I'm really not a big fan of. She does have a 50% physical damage barrier that can take 4 hits with some 15 AoE res on a buff, but that is dispellable, and she's not re-raise or courage capable, and her survivability really just comes down to the hit rate numbers, whether or not she can be hit or not. There's no nullify sure hit in her kit. Now, damage-wise, I think B is fine. The defense pen certainly is there. The slash pen is sort of there. We'll talk about that on the next slide. There's no imperils. You can remove AoE physical wide res, though, which is certainly nice. So overall, I think she's okay damage-wise, but she's not going to blow you away like some of these other characters do. The agility, as we talked about, is fine with the passive. The accuracy is still pretty good considering you'll have a lot of luck on her. The evasion is absolutely an A plus here. It's just unfortunate that there's no nullify sure hit in her kit. The movement's a B because there is jump +2 innately, and there is a move buff on the sub jump, but I don't think you'll use it all that often. The auto easy use is honestly probably a B also. Really a pretty straightforward AI and build because there's really no alternatives other than the evasion, so you don't have to think that hard about it. The game disruption's a B minus, if not less, to be honest. I don't see her being heavily used in Guild War. Even cost limited content's a little bit suspect because it always depends on the kind of cost limited content, but she's a great pair with Cypher, who absolutely is a meta unit. And the passives, they're honestly pretty good. I haven't met a B plus, but I think you're kind of locked into 2 of them. I could be convinced otherwise, but overall passives could be a little bit more flexible. The counter ability is good for what she wants. The overall job and kit, though, I'm going with a B. Duelist in general just really isn't all that amazing of a job, and her sub jobs really don't do anything to make up for that or amplify her kit already. The final grade for me is a B. She's a great 70 cost unit that certainly has a niche, but entirely dependent on hit rates, and the game has kind of moved on from that in a bit. And if you really just wanted a comparison, just think of your average Halloween Lucio at the moment and how often you might see him. Honestly, I think he's better than she is because of what he brings with his own utility and the HP barrier. But we've seen Halloween Lucio kind of fall off a cliff here as of late, and I think she's not that far off from him. Now, for the general thoughts, easily a 90 defense pen unit. That's certainly not a weakness at all. She can reliably be at 30% slash pen at all times. She does get 40 more from an attack, but it is dispellable, and it's not her first hit in the fight, or even potentially with the max damage calculation based on the AI. There's certainly vision cards that can get that up, so it's not the worst, but I think you're going to see some dips in her damage because of it. There's no barrier break either, so she's certainly weak to that. She does have the outstanding evade upside. It's the highest since Halloween Lucio. And she's got a great unit res niche too. 15 innately, 40 on a buff for 4 turns, but that is also dispellable, and 15 from her TMR weapon for 2 hits. So you can get very high here before even talking about equipment. She's hugely crit rate and crit damage dependent. The agility is a little bit lacking, as I said, and really doesn't have any modern tools survivability, in my opinion. She's somewhat limited in the team building as well, since she's basically an evade unit, and you really have to kind of tailor make your vision cards to support that. In addition to the fact that Sword Warrior as a class is kind of limited for options, Cypher is limited and about to be gone in the next week or two, and the Dark element overall without Cypher really just like isn't in a good spot. So should you build? Highly rated teammate for Cypher. There's a great amount of synergy between both of them. She's definitely worth getting to 140 if you can spare the resources. She does have cost limited potential. The Guild War potential is very dicey since the main survivability is really just based on evasion hit rates. I do think she's a great reincarnation target though, since the Mind Spheres are farmable. So you do still have to spend the Rainbow Scrolls and the Fragments and Awakening and all that, but Mind Spheres are a pretty big bottleneck for people, and you can easily get her 1600 Mind Spheres from farming her event. And quite frankly, it's encouraged because if evasion is her main survivability angle, you certainly want the reincarnation stat so that she can keep pace with the other reincarnated DPS you might encounter from a hit rate perspective. Now, the passive abilities, these are the 2 that I think you're kind of locked into. This top one here is the extra 12% evade rate. Does 12% hit rate really make an enormous difference? Maybe you could sub this off for the crit rate and crit damage, or the attack percent and AP consumption down. Not the end of the world, but again, her only survivability here is the evasion, so I would hate to mess with that percent. The tune-up, though, is a necessary one here for the agility and the defense pen. I'd stick with those. The React Mirage is certainly nice that it lowers accuracy for 3 turns. That's also part of the hit rate equation. That is certainly a very important thing for her to potentially make people miss. The main job buffs, the teammate buff, it's the AoE res, the crit rate, and she does have an ability to restore AP on a critical hit too, so that's excellent for her uptime overall. She does have that barrier. There is an evade rate buff here, but again, that's also dispellable, as is the unit res, so I would be skeptical about how much she can actually preserve here. And the main job offensive abilities, like we said, 2 AoE, 2 unit scaling. She does have some interesting shapes for her AoEs. Her unique 120 ability here is very nice in that it has the new tech of removing AoE wide resistance. The other one here, Rapid Cut, is kind of reminiscent of Lucio, where it's the healing power down of 70 and the defense break, as well as it being a double hit. And you also have the ability to further reduce accuracy on this large diamond, which is where her slash res pen is, but it's not a typical diamond. It's everyone around her, and this ignores friendly fire. So certainly nice that this can do this. Now, the limit break, there's none, so you're just kind of stuck with that main job. The duelist sub job is fair. This is another way to further decrease accuracy through the fight, so I do like this duelist sub job for this reason. I doubt you'll get this third buff off frequently, but certainly nice to have it there too. The dual gunner, I really see nothing for. Maybe the double shot, just because of the modifier and the decreased CT. I could see some fun little damage upsides here, but I don't really think this does anything to synergize with what she wants to do in the battlefield. And the Axe Knight too, really nothing here that I'm a fan of. Maybe Knight's Panacea, because I'm pretty sure if you're immobilized, you lose all of your evasion. So maybe just to dispel that or restore some health on a second Guild War fight, but I don't really like anything else here either. So yeah, sticking with the duelist. The TMR review, this is her own unique weapon in the game, and it's slash 20, 15 unit res for self. After 2 hits, it does go away, and also decreases AP of 10 to enemies on a critical hit. So obviously you're seeing a lot of trends there with the crit hit rates, that this is certainly part of it, and also part of the problem with her final agility, because since this does take up a TMR slot, you're not going to be able to use a high agility TMR. So overall, speed-wise, I have some concerns about where she lands up there. Now, for the job-based vision cards, by far the best ones here are the Great Sword and the Sword Knight. No doubt about that, but there is some synergy there with Axe and Sword Red Mage, and even the glove job as well with the new vision card that came out. Lord of Halloween really is the big one, though. That's the big luck percent card that joins many of these groups. And the general optimization, I think your TMR is one of the better options. I think the Wave Blade is the second best option if you want to go with a regular TMR instead. The other equipment's pretty standard, the Winter Coat. The Hermes Sandal, now that we have had more free match medals, I think there's more opportunity for people to max this item. This is an excellent item for her to potentially have, particularly for the agility up effect that it has. The Crow's Cloak is certainly one too, and the Espers, just your typical evade Espers as well. The Dark Shimmer, actually, I don't normally recommend because it's slightly lower on the evade side because its luck stat on the Esper is a little bit below average, but because she is a dark unit, there actually is some good offensive modifier synergy with that one. So any of these 4, I think, are pretty good, and the TMRs already covered that. The Truststones, to me, always luck on the left side for certain. The right side, I'd also go agility. And the passives, I think there's some flexibility here. I honestly don't know if you need the defense pen of 10, since you're likely having the 80 already. I don't know if the 10 really matters all that much. I might want to sub this one out for the dexterity of 15%, or even the reaction block rate, which, as we saw so far, she's got none of in her kit. But the rest of it, I would really lean heavily on the modifier side of things, just to make sure that she can do her damage from a modifier perspective. And the slash res pen of 10 is certainly nice in there too. I know I personally already have these top 2 built, the Dark Attack 10 and the slash res pen 10, just because there's so many slash oriented dark units that hopefully many of you have that built already as well. But some of my favorite teams, I don't have a lot of amazing suggestions, quite frankly. As mentioned, dark as an element is kind of whatever, and Sword Warrior is a little bit dicey to build with if you don't have all the right vision cards and units. But I do think the classic mono dark is certainly an option. It's not my favorite, but I think it's an easy one for many people to potentially use. I do also like a classic hyper evade here, where this is just like throwing 3 evade units into the field and just seeing if people can hit you. I don't think it's going to work in Guild War, but you might be able to catch some people off guard elsewhere. Halloween Lucio certainly fits into the fold here with the 2 other units. I do like the Addison Ray variation, though, and I've been using this in free match to a degree, where Addison does have null sure hit on her buff, which also has courage, which both Sonille and Cypher desperately need. So I like this team for only one fight where Addison can buff both of them and give that null sure hit and courage with the heal back as well. But you could also theoretically go with a team variation with someone like Fina, where if you just wanted to throw out two evade units and just heal them up and hope they don't die, I think that's possible too. So the team building might be tough, but these are probably some of my favorites that stand out. And that's the Sonille character review altogether. Again, it's a great free unit, a great 70 cost unit. I don't know what the expectations are around this unit, and I don't know if it's going to be a real big impact in the game, but I do recommend having it be a unit that's built out of all the evade units in the game at the moment. She probably does have the most potential out of what's still kind of remaining given the power creep of the game. There is some natural synergy with some newer units in that sword warrior class, and the vision cards are certainly there too if you've been stocking up on them. But that's my thoughts for now. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll talk to y'all later.